I didn't choose this. It wasn't my fault. I can't keep on blaming my parents. I can't stop taking medication because I'm going to die if I don't. And I am more than that. Hi everyone, my name is Jerop Limo and I am joined by Medhin today.
How are you, Jerop?
I am well, and you, Medhin?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for welcoming to the IRF office. I'm happy to be here.
I am honored you're here. Yeah, I am.
Let me start by asking you if you could share with us your personal journey of living with HIV and what have been the triumphs and the challenges that you can share with us.
I'll try and shorten it as much as possible. But I was born living with HIV. So I have been living with HIV for 25 years. Yeah. And I have been on treatment for almost 17 years now. And I was diagnosed when I was a child. And I was initiated into treatment still when I was still young by my parents. And I've been on treatment since then. When I think about the challenges, I think for any person living with HIV, the challenge is always acceptance. And we have this phase we call the acceptance journey or the acceptance phase, where as a teenager, you are struggling with one, hoping that you won't die, because at some point I thought I would die, hoping that you would amount to something and that being positive won't be everything that everyone sees when they see you, that you can actually live a fulfilling life, achieve dreams, make it at least, because by the time I was being diagnosed, people were dying. I had just lost my mom, I had just lost my sister. So in my head, I was like, okay, maybe I'm also just going to die. So my struggling phase, or rather the challenges, was going through the acceptance journey, which was pretty tough, because then people are saying you're supposed to live, but you don't feel like you're actually going to live. And it feels like your whole world is supposed to be determined by this thing, which everyone thinks is a disease, is a curse, and you are not supposed to be in this world, and you're not good enough because you're HIV positive. Basically, those were the thoughts in my head then. And for me, it took almost 6 years to wake up from not looking at myself as the end, or rather HIV is going to be the end of me. It took me almost 6 years. So that journey was not easy, struggling with adherence, the viral load being too high. At some point I had pneumonia, had TB twice. And I remember being in hospital for almost half a year. And, my dad was so frustrated, because it's not easy for any parent, because for me it was difficult, and also for him, seeing me on deathbed. So I would say that was the most difficult phase, but I made it through. The triumph for me was the day I woke up and I decided it wasn't going to define me. I think for me that was the moment I took power back, I guess, where I said it's not about HIV. I didn't choose this. It wasn't my fault. I can't keep on blaming my parents. I can't stop taking medication because I'm going to die if I don't. And I am more than that. So for me, that was the triumph, the day I realized I was meant for greater things, and my weakness, which could actually be my strength. Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting journey.
Yeah.
So what kind of support systems have been the most helpful for you in this journey?
One is family support. When you're positive, a lot of times people around you at that time, many years back, would sort of push you away, or rather, we're not supposed to sit with you, we're not supposed to share a meal with you. And there were families and people who are going through that. And I'm glad I didn't go through that. I'm glad I was embraced and I was loved and I was shown care. Seeing my dad, my family fighting for my wellness, telling me you have to take your medication no matter how difficult it is. And I remember I was so small, I was so tiny, I had been given so many medication, I was on supplements, and it was difficult. I was not just a normal child. I couldn't go and play outside. And, my dad just wanted me to leave, but I didn't understand that, or rather, I had given up on myself. So love and support from family is very, very important, and that is what kept me going. But I'll also add knowledge, empowerment, skills, information. All of that is very important, because then it sort of allows you to function and reason from an informed point of view. I got to understand what HIV was better. I got to understand why I'm taking my medication. I got to understand what it does and all these things, which I didn't know before, apart from the little information which we had from school, which was basically AIDS kills. And I remember participating in a support group in my facility then, and seeing other young people who had graduated, other young people who are doing amazing things in their lives. I was like, I can actually achieve all those things myself.
You have been very active in the HIV response for 7 years now. Can you tell us the work you do and how that has impacted the young people in Kenya?
So I work at IREP. IREP stands for Ambassador for Youth and Adolescent Reproductive Health Program. I am honored to be the executive director of an organization that works to serve adolescents and young people in different counties, implementing different projects. For me, it always feels like I'm trying to make sure there's no any other young person who goes through the same journey I went through, because sometimes understanding adolescents and young people is difficult. And if you've not been through that phase, you might not be able to understand why they're struggling with treatment, why they're taking drug holidays, why they're struggling with self-esteem and all those things. So for me, my work has been majorly to be the mirror for these young people, give them knowledge and skills and empower them so that they're able to make decisions from an informed point, but also to support many of them who are living with HIV like me with their treatment journeys. Some of them who feel hopeless, who feel like they won't make it, who feel like they won't get married or they won't have children. But there's this other side where science has evolved. We have treatment. You no longer have to fear. You can get married, you can have children, you can be a doctor, and you can achieve all these things. So for me, it's to be that mirror. And I feel like that's one of the major impacts I have had in my work with young people, but also to address some of the challenges we see in our communities, in our country, where we see young people leading with new HIV infections. We're seeing young girls leading with teenage pregnancy. We're seeing gender-based violence as a challenge in our communities. And all that stems from many other issues. Of course, we talk about economic empowerment, social factors, but the basis is lack of information and empowerment. As an African community, we practice, we are cultural people. So there are so many conversations that we share away from, which we shouldn't. So for the last 7 years, my work has been to empower the young people, but also what we call the spheres of influence of young people: parents, leaders, church leaders, area chiefs, all those people who surround young people, so that when I empower them and release them to the community, then they're also able to utilize that empowerment and that information in an environment where everyone is equally empowered. Yeah. So, Medhin, my turn to ask you a question. So what programs, you as working at the UNAIDS, what programs are you implementing that are focusing on adolescents and young people? And even how are you working with youth-led organizations?
Thank you for that question. UNAIDS globally, but more specifically in Kenya, we bring almost 13 different UN agencies to work with us in support of the national AIDS response. And as you know, UNAIDS has developed the strategy with an inequality lens to make sure that we are ending inequality to end AIDS by 2030, and countries are able to achieve the universal target of 95, 95, 95. In fact, Kenya, thanks to your great work and other communities, the partnership that we have with government, with communities, with development partners, Kenya is almost, in fact, beyond achieving the 98, 98, 94. So we have only the last mile that we need to achieve. So there is that support that we are providing collectively with the UN organizations, but more on the strategy. The strategy is focusing on young people and vulnerable key population. In Kenya, that 41% of the new HIV infection happen among adolescent young people, especially the age 15 to 24. And when we look at the adolescent girls and young women specifically, they are 4 times likely to achieve HIV infection. So we focus on adolescent young people by empowering, by making sure that we capacitate the community-led response and community-led monitoring. So young people are leading, as you have shared with us earlier, and responding to the challenge that they are facing. So we support different youth-led organizations like yourself to make sure that we are addressing the HIV, sexual reproductive health services, because we have also seen in Kenya that the gender-based violence, the teenage pregnancy is at its highest, that is affecting adolescent and young girls. So that is the area that we support. But beyond this, we also look at how can we sustain. Now we talked about the 98, 98, 94 that Kenya has already achieved, but how do we make sure that the response is sustainable politically, programmatically, and financially? So we also support this process so that the country is indeed sustaining the response and addressing the inequalities, ending AIDS by 2030. These are some of the programs, but there are quite a number of interventions that we support. One is, for example, ending the triple threat, HIV, sexual gender-based violence, and the teenage pregnancy, but also adolescent sexual reproductive health, as you know, that you are part of. So we have diverse programs, including the community-led monitoring that we are implementing in the 9 counties, and I believe you are also part of that. So these are some of the programs that we support, but very important that we strengthen and empower communities to deliver services, because that way you will be able to address the stigma, discrimination that is preventing people, not to access services.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I have a last question to you, Jerop. In September, that is next month, you will be attending the Summit of the Future and also the UNAIDS high-level meeting in New York. So the UN describes this event as the once-in-a-generation moment. So it's really very unique. So what is your expectation ahead of these events? But also, what messages do you hope that the leaders who are attending the Summit of the Future will take away from you?
For me, one of the most important things is to do what I call co-representation, because that's what I'll be doing. I'll be representing the voices of over 1.5 million Kenyans living with HIV, actually many Africans living with HIV. And for me, the most important thing is One, for our leaders in that room that day to leave knowing that communities are not beneficiaries. They are equal right holders in the space. That they have a voice, that they have skills and expertise, and we don't have to continue capacity building them like they say. That we are impacting our communities here in our community level. For me, that's very, very important for them to view us as equal right holders and not just beneficiaries of programs. But the other thing is that community work requires resources. It's a lot of work, empowering, doing behavior change programs and all this work that we are doing, and it requires resources. But the most important thing for us to sustain this program and interventions that have been working, we need resources from our own leaders. We need domestic resources. So they need to be able to think about funding community-led interventions, funding community service delivery structures that have proven to be impactful and lead to change. And thirdly, I would say that they need to look at communities as partners. I think for the longest time, when we engage the government and our leaders, it always seems as if, communities, we are just communities. But an equal playing ground is what will get us change, where we are viewed as equal players in the space, where our data is valued, where our input is valued, where our suggestions are taken into account and actually considered. I think for us as communities, that is equally important. So a partnership would be really nice, because the change we want to see cannot be achieved by just us. We need them, they need us. So a partnership is extremely, extremely important. And lastly, for me, is the need to always think about community-led. I think it's a word we talk about, and now for us young people, we say meaningful and ethical engagement of adolescents and young people in all spaces. Lived experience is an important aspect in programmatic work. We should not just look at policies and documents, but think about the lived experiences and the lived realities of the people, which is equally important. And when we think about programs holistically, when we don't think about biomedical only, when we think about giving Jerop ARVs, that's not enough. Jerop needs social support. Jerop needs a job to survive. Jerop needs education. But how do we provide holistic programs that reflect the lived realities of the people? And for me, that includes really viewing communities and thinking about meaningful and ethical engagement of communities and young people in all spaces, especially decision-making spaces.
That's really great, and I'm hoping that this will become true. I wish you all the best in the General Assembly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerop. Yeah.